Joining me on this episode of The Gray Area. So excited to have this guest with me. If you are a Cowboys fan or an LSU Tiger fan, you know his work over the years. And of course, he's a proud Louisiana native, proud LSU Tiger. Currently, these days, he's working for Fox Sports. You can catch him on the hit show Speak every single day. He is my man, David Helman, joining me on The Gray Area. What's up, David?
Good to be on with you, Kev. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot, man. I appreciate you taking a few minutes with me, obviously. As we're recording this a day before the NFL draft, the Cowboys picking at number 26. We'll get to the NFL draft here in just a little bit. But for you, I'm fascinated. I wanted to have you on because one of the things that I've loved most watching you over the last, year and a half is just the glow up and the come up for David Helman from staff writer with the Dallas Cowboys for a decade to now budding television star on a hit show on FS1 every single day. From your perspective, though, what has the last 18 months or so been like for you, just from not just the job change, but just how things have changed for you, whether it be job-wise, personally, and that kind of thing?
Oh, I absolutely love talking about myself, so I appreciate that opportunity. No, it's been weird, man. I mean, honestly, from a professional standpoint, I hope this doesn't sound conceited, but I always tell people, I mean, it doesn't feel that different to me. And I always tell people, I know, I worked for a team website for 10 years. I worked for DallasCowboys.com, and I think that carries probably a little bit of a stigma with it because people don't trust that you're telling them the real because you work for the team. And it's also kind of it's siloed off, like
Yeah.
a lot of people don't see our not that they don't see it, but like it doesn't weigh as heavily as like what ESPN says or what Fox says or any of the major outlets. Especially, in a crowded space like the Dallas Cowboys, where there's 10 million outlets covering the team. So like, maybe not everybody knew who I was or knew what I did, but like I got so many reps doing so many different things with the Cowboys. Like obviously writing is that's my passion and that's what I got started in the industry doing. So like that obviously is something I've done a lot of, but like over the years at the Cowboys, like I've done live TV, I've done taped TV, I've done radio, I've done podcasting, like I've live streamed the draft, I've hosted draft events. I mean, like pick a type of media, and I've done it at least a little bit, and in some cases a lot of it. So like doing TV, even doing live TV was not that new to me. Like obviously it's a way bigger audience, but the mechanics of doing TV, it really like I was maybe nervous about it for a couple of days. And then I was like, yeah, this feels the same as doing a show in the Cowboys studio, honestly. As long as you don't think too hard about how many more people are watching it, it's not a big deal. The strangest thing for me is just it's just been a weird year for my lifestyle. Because I mean I got hired to cover the Cowboys as their Cowboys reporter for FoxSports.com. There was really no plan of me doing TV at the time I took the job around a year ago at this time.
Mm-hmm.
But networking is everything, and being good to people has value. And my good friend Emmanuel Acho took a chance on me because we have history working for the Cowboys together. And so, I mean, it's been a ton of fun, and I love doing the show, but it also kind of came out of nowhere. Like I think I've told you before, they gave me about 72 hours notice that they wanted me to spend football season in LA. Like they called me on a Thursday and were like, "Can you be here Monday to go through rehearsals?" And I was like,
Because your
Sure.
plan was to do the beat for the Cowboys
Yeah,
as part of Fox, right?
I was booking my travel to Cowboy games. I was actually in California at training camp when a lot of these conversations started. Um, so yeah, like I was prepared for a completely different season. And then they were like, no, we'd really like you to come out to LA for football season. And then who am I to pass up that opportunity? But long story short, I've been living out of a suitcase or maybe a couple of suitcases for the last like 8 months. Like I was out here from August to February, and I think I had 3 suitcases full of clothes, and I paid to have my car shipped out here. So like I had a couple of things that have made me feel a little bit at home, but like for the most part, it's kind of felt like I've been living in a hotel for the last 8 months, and I'm doing it again right now. They asked me to come out and be on the show during the lead up to the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm out here for the month of April, and it's the same thing where I'm kind of living out of my suitcase again. So it hasn't been very settled, and I'm not complaining at all. It's a ton of fun. It's an amazing opportunity, but if you've never done it, try living out of a suitcase for 7 or 8 months. Like it's just it's a surreal feeling where you're going about your daily life and you have a daily routine, but you don't really ever feel like you're at home, if that makes sense. So that's been the biggest adjustment. Like professionally, I really feel like I was ready for the opportunity, but it's been a weird adjustment personally.
Who has been for you the biggest influence? Obviously, a lot of the things that you did with the Dallas Cowboys put you in a position to be prepared for an opportunity like this. But who would you say, whether it be personally or professionally, that really helped guide you and mold you to be in a spot where you could take advantage of something like this?
Well, I think I'd have to start with my boss at the Cowboys, who's still there, Derek Eagleton. Not so much like influencing my style or the way that I do things, but just to give me the opportunity and basically say, hey, you want to do this, or you think you can do this? Do you think I think you can do it? Do you want to? I mean, that goes all the way back to putting me on the draft show, the Cowboys Draft Podcast. Like that started, I think I was 24, and they didn't have enough for me to do, basically. And he was like, well, we got this draft podcast. What do you know about the draft? And I was like, not a lot, but I would love the opportunity to be on a podcast. And it went from there. 5 years later, like, hey, we think we can make some headway and, do a live TV show. We'll double stream it on the internet, and, maybe we'll get a sponsor to pick it up. Like, is that something you want to do? And I'm like, I don't really know a whole lot about TV, but that sounds fun. So I owe Derek a ton for just believing in me enough to give me the opportunities. And then as far as like my style, what I've learned about the industry, I mean, God, our guy Brian Broaddus, your teammate over at 105.3 The Fan. I mean,
Yeah.
I owe that guy so much. Just sitting next to him for a decade, soaking up knowledge about, I mean, everything. At this point, I couldn't tell you, of all of the football knowledge that I've accrued in my time covering the Cowboys, I couldn't give you a percentage, but like so much of what I know about the league or the team or the game of football, I probably picked up from him. Whether it's like X's and O's, like the fundamentals of playing football, or like how the NFL works. Like, what are the intricacies of the details that the guys in the front office do? Like, if a guy has this job title, what does it mean he does? How do the paychecks get delivered? How does the equipment staff work? Like all that stuff. Brian has done so many of those things and been in the league so long. He just taught me so much about things like that. And then, like I said, I mean, football itself too. Like I've learned so much about the actual game of football. So, and even he's been doing radio and podcasting for a long time at this point. He's taught me plenty about making content, making entertaining radio, and things like that. So, I mean, there's half a dozen other people I could name, but those two are at the top of the list in terms of like if I'm saying thank you to people, Derek and Brian, if you happen to listen to this, thanks a lot.
Now, you're a true son of the South, a Louisiana native. And for people who don't know, yes, you cover the Cowboys, but correct me if I'm wrong, you grew up as a Saints fan, correct?
I catch hell for it on a regular basis among Cowboy fans. Yes, I the irony, and I don't have a problem talking about that. I mean, I've spent 10 years covering the team, so hopefully people trust my bona fides at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
not only did I grow up a Saints fan, but like all Saints fans hate the Cowboys. I mean, it's just
That's very true.
I don't know if Cowboy fans really realize that because Cowboy fans are worried about other things.
My wife is
Uh,
from Louisiana, and her entire family are Saints fans. So trust me, I get the
well,
hatred from that side.
you gotta keep in mind, like the Saints, before Sean Payton and Drew Brees, the Saints are terrible. Like they had
Mm-hmm.
like three good seasons in their history. They were nothing. And so growing up a Saints fan before the Drew Brees era, you were outnumbered in your own state. Like there were more Cowboy fans in your own state. Like more people were like, "Yeah, I know the Saints play right down the road, but I'd rather root for the good team in Dallas." And that's infuriating if you're a Saints fan. Um, I mean, I even remember like when Peyton and Breeze took over, like when the Saints were first getting good, there used to be weekly wars. The TV stations in Shreveport and Monroe and Natchitoches, like all the North Louisiana TV stations would have like weekly fights over which game was going to be on. Like they would let their viewers vote. Like, do you want the Saints or do you want the Cowboys? And
Wow.
it's a weekly thing. And it took years for the Saints to kind of win that back and then have it be like, okay, we're going to watch the Saints. So, oh man, it was so frustrating growing up in New Orleans, growing up in Louisiana. Um, I'll never forget the Cowboys hired me, and I tell people the big news like, oh my God, I got a job in the NFL. I got a job working for the Dallas Cowboys. And like nobody in my life's immediate reaction was happy. They they were like, this is literally with a dozen different people, this is how the conversation went. Oh, the Cowboys? And then they would pause for like a beat and then they would go, well, it could be worse. At least it's not the Falcons. And like that was basically how it went. So yeah,
Yeah.
like not only did I grow up a Saints fan, I grew up very much not liking the Cowboys. So it's funny. It's ironic how life works out sometimes.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen worse from hatred when it comes for Saints fans was not the Cowboys. That whole Saints Falcons thing is extremely deep, and I've learned that over the last several
Oh,
years as well. That
that's
that's
not
really
that's
deep.
not a joke. Yeah, that I would say I don't like for various reasons, like the rivalries in the NFL aren't as meaningful as they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a handful of them that really are. Like obvious, I mean, Cowboys, Eagles, Cowboys, Giants for sure. Saints, Falcons is it's on the short list. Like it's a big deal.
So before we turn to the draft, I want to ask you, what were some of your favorite things growing up in Louisiana? Like food wise, culture wise, what are some of the things that even to this day that you take with you from your time growing up in the South?
You know what's funny? I like so like I'll give you the full story because like it's easy to just say, well, I'm from Louisiana, I grew up in Louisiana, which is true, but like so technically I was born in Florida. I was born in Pensacola. So I moved to New Orleans when I was like 6 or 7. And then on top of that, my parents both were New Orleans transplants. My parents met in New Orleans at work, but my parents are both from the Midwest. So like I obviously grew up there, but like I don't think of myself as particularly Southern. Like
Okay.
I don't have a Louisiana accent. My parents, my families are from like Wisconsin and Kansas City. So yes, I grew up in the South, but I don't think of myself as like this crazy Southerner. But without getting too deep into my personal life, I start like my girlfriend. I've been seeing my girlfriend for, I guess, 7 or 8 months at this point. and she's from the Midwest. And like getting to know her, she's like, "Oh my God, you're so Southern. Like, what are these sayings that are coming out of your mouth? Like,
Yeah.
you eat what?" Like, my parents made her grits and griots for dinner, and she was like, "What the hell are grits and griots? What on earth am I eating?" And so, like, I kind of had to stop and be like, "Oh, I really am a Southerner. Like,
Yeah.
I took all this stuff for granted." That's it's been funny to kind of realize that. But shoot, man, like, yeah, I mean, I've spent most of my life in New Orleans, and like I said, I think you probably take some of it for granted. Obviously, the food. The first thing I did when I moved away from home was force my mom to teach me her gumbo recipe so that I could make
Mm.
it myself. Um, what else? What else? What else? Seafood's not the same. Even in LA, even in LA, which is right on the ocean, I'm here. It's not the same. Like I didn't realize how much better Gulf oysters are than everywhere else in the world. Like West Coast oysters, East Coast oysters miss me with that. They're so much better in Louisiana. Um, shoot. I mean, what else? What? It's one of those things where like it's hard to think of something specific, but then like
Yeah.
when you talk to somebody else, you're like, oh, you don't do that, or you don't think about that. I mean,
Yeah.
I
And you get
haven't
kind of
missed a
reminded
Mardi
of
Gras
it.
other
Yeah.
than yeah, for sure. Other than COVID, I haven't missed a Mardi Gras in a decade. I always That's kind of my chance to go home and like have a reunion with all my people at home. Um, and obvious, I had to wear the LSU hoodie. Like
You
obviously,
had
I
to
wear
represent, of
LSU
course.
on my sleeve, quite literally. Um, yeah, man, it's definitely living in LA. It's funny too. Again, like you take it for granted. Like I don't really think that much about it, but you get out here and people find out you're from New Orleans, and they freak out. They're like, "Oh my God, like what's it like to grow up there? That's crazy."
It's
I'm
like
like,
this
"Growing up
mythical
in LA
land
sounds
that's yeah,
crazy. Are you
yeah.
kidding?"
Yeah.
Yeah, for real, for real. It's funny, you know, coming in contact with that, where people like, I guess New Orleans it's not quite Las Vegas, but it's similar in the sense that a lot of people only think of it as like a destination for parties and vacations.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, nah, man, like, nah, we're down there doing all the boring day-to-day stuff just like everybody else.
Like we live regular lives down there too.
Yeah, but it's been fun. And I mean, I've been gone long enough at this point that I think you have to make a more conscious effort to like stay connected to it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that's been something I try to stay on top of, is like keeping in touch with everybody at home. I subscribe to the New Orleans newspaper, even though I haven't lived there in like 10 years. Just stuff like that.
Well, shout out to whichever of your parents is from Kansas City. I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri myself. So definitely a son of the
Oh, is that right?
Midwest. That's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
my dad is from Kansas City, which again, it's funny. So many like little things. Like my dad grew up a Chiefs fan, but he switched to the Saints when he moved to New Orleans. He still has like a soft spot for the Chiefs, but he's much
Sure.
more of a Saints fan now. But I could have grown up a Chiefs fan, and then I'd be getting to enjoy all this Patrick Mahomes stuff. But my dad switched
Exactly.
sides. Oh
Well,
well.
speaking of the NFL, we are just one day away as we record this from the NFL draft and the Cowboys picking at number 26. For you, you have been intimately covering the draft for years. Obviously, now your role being a little bit different in what you're doing now, though. But for Cowboys fans who have trepidation about what could be happening at 26, what piece of advice throughout all the years of covering the draft and even looking at this draft would you say about what the Cowboys need to do to approach this year's draft?
I tweeted it out this morning. Actually, it's good timing. Will McClay took charge of the draft board in 2014, so this will be his 10th draft running the Cowboys draft process. And obviously, Jerry and Stephen Jones are going to have a heavy amount of input, and Jerry's going to call the guy that they draft tomorrow night. But like Will Will is the guy running the troops, the guy who's running 99% of the grunt work in this process. And since he took over, they've made 8 first-round picks. 6 of them have been all-pro at some point in their career. Zach Martin's going to the Hall of Fame. Byron Jones was a second-team all-pro at corner. Zeke is a 2-time all-pro. Leighton Vander Esch is a second-team all-pro at least once. CD Lamb was just named all-pro. Micah Parsons is one of the best defenders in football. Only 2 guys haven't been named all-pro. Taco Charlton, obviously one of the Cowboys' biggest misses in recent history, and Tyler Smith, who has only played 1 year and had a pretty damn good rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it'll sting forever. I mean, it's insane that they could have an even better track record if they had taken TJ Watt over Taco. But even with that mistake, their hit rate in the first round is insane. They are, if not the best, they are among the best in the league at making these big time picks. So my advice would just to be take a deep breath, because the odds say that they will probably be right about whoever they pick. Not definitely, but probably. And especially way back at 26, if you're picking, if you're picking in the teens or obviously in the top 10, there's a lot more pressure to get this right. But you're picking at 26, you have no idea who's going to be there. The odds that any of the guys available are going to become superstars are very low. Just relax and say, hey, the guys making this decision have earned the benefit of the doubt, and the pressure should be off. You shouldn't be working yourself up into a stress ball over this front office making a pick at 26. Whoever it is, it'll probably work out.
So 2 things I hear: and Will McClay we trust, and take the Aaron Rodgers approach. RELAX. Just relax. It's going to be okay.
Just relax. The roster is good. They're picking at 26. They don't have a ton of obvious needs. That's the other. It's funny. We spend 3 months saying they don't really have a need. They can do whatever they want. And then if the guy that we don't love gets picked tomorrow night, everybody's gonna freak out. Oh my god.
That's right.
So yeah. There is nobody in the Cowboys organization I trust to do his job well more than Will McClay. And yeah, let's all just take a beat and chill out and see what happens.
So I'll ask you, is there a name or 2 that you are looking at to say, hey, this is maybe the name I would like to see the Cowboys pick? Or are you just like, hey, these are a few names that are here. Don't be surprised if this is one of the names that gets picked by the Cowboys.
So I've done this forever, because if there's this is just me personally. I argue with Jeff Kavanaugh about this all the time, my good buddy Jeff. Jeff fixates on who he thinks is good and what he wants to happen, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to get yourself disappointed. Whereas I fixate on what I think the Cowboys will do. And there's a big difference between those 2 things. And I'm like, yeah, I have opinions about the players, but at the end of the day, who really cares what I think? They aren't asking me for my opinion, and they have all of their own set of criteria. By the way, they have so much more information. I would guess the information that we have available to us is 20% of the iceberg, Yeah. I'll never forget that. After a draft 1 year, somebody involved in the draft process was like, man, y'all are so upset that we didn't take so-and-so, or we didn't like so-and-so. And what you don't know is this. And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah. I wish I had known that before I, got all indignant about it.
Player. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something I like to keep in mind. So I've got my own preferences, but I prefer to focus on what I think the Cowboys will do, because I think that makes more sense. So in the vein of that, I mean, I don't think it's smoke that I think they would prefer to add an offensive weapon. Like in a perfect world, they would prefer to get a guy who's going to help Dak. I think it makes sense to be focused on the tight ends. Like the Michael Mayer stuff is not a smokescreen. I think they really, really like him. I think they will draft Bijan Robinson if he's available at 26. I really do. I just,
Agreed.
I
Agreed.
will continue to say, I think we're doing a lot of worrying about nothing. I don't think the NFL is going to let Bijan Robinson fall that far. But if he's there, 26 is where the slide stops. I'll bet you that right now.
Yeah.
Um, we know that they've looked at a couple of receivers. I think they would love to have Jackson Smith and Jigba or maybe Zay Flowers, but I obviously we don't think that's very realistic. So I really in a realistic world, I think you're looking at Michael Mayer or Bijan Robinson in terms of like adding talent. I don't based on what we heard from Mike McCarthy the other day about a tight end in the first round needing to do everything. Me personally, that doesn't sound like Dalton Kincaid to me, just
Agreed.
based on what I've watched. So I think Michael Mayer is the name to watch. I think Bijan's the name to watch. If those guys aren't there, then I think you're talking about best defender available. And that's where you get into, I think Will McDonald is a big time name to know. Uh, Dan Quinn worked him out personally at his pro day at Iowa State. He's got some freaky athleticism. I think he can bend better than a guy that you would hope to get at pick number 26. Um, who else? Who else? I mean, I'll throw in my pet cat in this whole draft process is Nolan Smith from Georgia. Again, like if it was me, if it was Dave Helman saying this is what I want, I would say Nolan Smith. I haven't really heard anything about him on the Cowboys front, and I also don't know if he'll be there. But a name I'm kicking around in the back of my brain. Emmanuel Forbes, the Mississippi State corner, I think is a name worth knowing. I know he's incredibly small. He weighs like 165 pounds, but
Got
the
some
ball
dog
skill.
to him.
Yeah, and I mean the ball skills speak for themselves too. I mean, whatever it is, he's got like 16 interceptions in the last 3 years or something
Like
crazy
half
like
of them
that.
back for touchdowns. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of them back for touchdowns.
And then actually, look, the best thing you can do, the Cowboys have done such a better job at locking this stuff down since Mike McCarthy took over. Like it's so much harder to get this information. But the best thing you can do is pay attention to the names that start trickling out at this point. And like I'm not always an expert. Like literally last night I thought to myself, I think I'm going to watch some Drew Sanders games because I keep hearing that name, the linebacker out of Arkansas. So and you know what? I immediately see the appeal. I'm not saying he's like the best player in the class or anything, but like he's an off-ball linebacker who contributes to the pass rush. He can do both. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to. Comparisons are the worst because they always wind up giving people the wrong idea. He's definitely not Micah Parsons. He is not. He's much less athletic, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a similar skill set in the sense of it's a guy who can play off-ball linebacker, who can also blitz effectively, and also has pass rush ability. I don't think he's got the natural freakiness that Micah has, but that's why you're drafting him. You're drafting him to be like a 100 tackle linebacker who can also chip in like 4 to 6 sacks. So that would be interesting. And then if all else fails, then maybe you draft an offensive lineman. Like if everybody's gone, and I mean everybody, maybe you draft an offensive lineman. So now that I've named like 8 players, I can't go wrong.
That's right. That's right. You covered the umbrella. Last one before I let you go. Give me David Hellman's states of the Dallas Cowboys. You watch this team. You cover this team intimately. The team that's won 24 games the last couple of years. Still hasn't had the deep playoff success that we saw in the early 90s with this team. Where are you with this team going into this offseason? of what they need to do to try and take that next step next year?
I mean, it's funny. It's a funny juxtaposition because I think the Cowboys are about as well positioned to do something as they have been in a long time. They had the exact offseason I've been begging them to have for a few years now. You know, they were clearly aggressive without doing anything reckless. They added a couple of very talented players to a team that had already won 12 games. There's really no crazy significant losses to speak of. And on top of that, the NFC looks a lot weaker on paper. You know, we talk about this on Speak all the time. If we can agree that Philly is probably the favorite to, and I'm not saying that they will, but if we say on paper Philly is the favorite to repeat as NFC champions, then after that, maybe you say San Francisco, but San Francisco, who knows what's going on with their quarterback situation. And after those two, I mean, tell me who for sure is better on paper than Dallas. I mean, you can throw Detroit out there as like this hot young team, but I got to see a little bit more from them before I'm putting them on that level. Green Bay, obviously.
On football games, apparently these
days too. Green Bay lost Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady retired.
I can't trust Kirk Cousins as far as I can throw him, so I don't.
I will say, you know, I personally think we're probably writing off the Rams a little bit too soon. I think that they got extraordinarily unlucky last year with injuries, and all of those injured guys are coming back. But again, I mean, no matter how you slice it, we have to say Dallas is one of the two, or at the very least three, best teams in the NFC. They've improved their roster. So that's one half of it. I feel better about the Cowboys than I have in probably 5 years, maybe 4. I was really high on the 2019 team, which is a bummer because they didn't even make the playoffs. But so yeah, I feel about as good about the Cowboys as I have in 3 or 4 years. And then the flip side of that is they're still the Cowboys. Take your pick of
always that caveat. That's right.
Yeah, they are. I mean, at some point, seeing is believing, right? And I think this is, I mean, it's on Mike McCarthy to continue the forward momentum. Obviously, you know, it was a big victory for him that he managed to go to back-to-back playoffs because the Cowboys hadn't done that in forever. But that's old news now. You got to do it again. And then obviously, as a leading member of the Dak Prescott Apologist Club, you know, there's not going to be a lot in the way of excuses this year. I think by the time we get done with this draft, you're going to look at this team and say, like, if not now, then when? Like, if not now, when are you going to have a better roster and a weaker field to compete against than right now? And so who on earth can say if they get it done? And I'd be lying. Like, I don't have a good feeling about it because the Cowboys have never given me a reason to have a good feeling about it. But that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, man, if this were any other team, I would feel incredibly optimistic. But it is still the Dallas Cowboys, so we'll see how they manage to make it all go wrong.
David, tell the folks they can find you, what you're doing these days, man.
You can find me on Twitter at DavidHellman_. I am usually talking about the Cowboys with with a few LSU tweets thrown in for good measure. I'm currently on Speak on FS1. Come find me at 3:30 Central Time, 1:30 Pacific. I write for Fox Sports. I'm actually doing we're doing some Twitter Spaces in the lead up to the draft, so I'll actually be live on Twitter today and tomorrow talking draft, getting ready for the big night tomorrow. So yeah, come find me wherever. I appreciate it.
And tell your boy Shady McCoy to quit spoiling stuff. I don't know if you know, but today is the 4-year anniversary of when he decided to get out on the Twitter machine and spoil Avengers Endgame for all of us, telling us that Tony Stark got killed at the end of Endgame.
I have a funny story about that I'm not going to share on a podcast, but
you can't say that, David. Okay.
yes, I can.
Okay.
I'll make sure to remind him, though. I'll make sure to remind him.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, because we were none too thrilled with Shady McCoy on that particular day 4 years ago in Game 5. David, I appreciate the time, my man. Thank you so much, and looking forward to all of your continued success, my man. All with the the kombucha and the Appalachian Department, all that stuff in LA.
Yeah, I'm a West Coast guy now. I'm gonna go drink a kombucha and put on a pair of like Tom slippers and step out into the world, man. I appreciate it. This is good, Kev.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.